What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, this is a game that I had not heard of until it was recommended to me by a good friend of the channel, Van Alphen, the guy who consistently destroys me on every online leaderboard out there. And when he mentioned it to me, I looked at it and went, ooh, yeah, I gotta check this out. And indeed, it's quite something. So this is Gridform, and it comes to us from a largely single-person developer, and honestly, if I had to categorize this game, I think it is the closest thing there is to an evolution of the classic game Geometry Wars. Yes, I've mentioned Geometry Wars several times in prior videos about twin-stick shooters, but this one is just, it's something else. And I'll show you why here. So, I've only done one section of this so far, but as you can see, this game does have a number of different levels to it. As well, I just want to point out that this is a pre-release build that I'm playing that the developer provided to me. He has informed me that it is very close to final, and what you're seeing here will pretty much be what's in the final game, but, you know, there may be a few changes here and there, just so you know. So, you have all of these different levels that you can choose, and as you go through, you unlock these different chains. Now, I've made a point of doing every level, though you don't have to in order to be able to get to the boss, but you really want to experience everything, because what's cool about this versus Geometry Wars is that all the levels are different from each other. So they all have different kinds of enemies in them, they have different core pass objectives, they have different failure objectives. Some of them it's getting killed, some of them it's don't get things done within a certain amount of time. There's various different ways to do it, and you have 5 different ship configurations here that you can choose from for each level. There's no score in this, it's all managed based on percentages and your time, as you can see. So it's not a score attack game like Geometry Wars typically is. But you can see here, if you've played that, you can see where its inspiration came from, needless to say. But this does so many things with that Geometry Wars formula, and it's a great formula. Like, Geometry Wars still holds its own today. Many consider it one of the best twin-stick games of all time, and I think you can make a compelling case for that. And Geometry Wars itself has had a couple of sequels, and it's had some very interesting additions and reinterpretations of it. I still have the Geometry Wars game, I believe it was called Galaxies, on the Nintendo DS, which I still think is an amazing evolution of that. But this is a modern interpretation of it that I think is really cool, because every level's different. So you see here, it's telling me to kill tanks, which are these yellow things, and again, the failure is if I take too long. So you have, because this isn't a score attack game, you have no incentive to go after things other than the core objectives. So you're not really being encouraged to stick around a level longer than you need to in order to complete your goal. Some of these are not very hard, but some of them in this first section have been quite gnarly in spots, including the boss. The boss actually took me quite a number of tries to take out. So it's going to be demanding of you. But the core gameplay is very simple. It's a twin-stick game, so you can play it with a mouse and keyboard. I'm playing with a controller. You aim your gun, you fire it, and periodically, you'll see at the top there, you have a special meter that will charge up, which lets you do something like that. And each of the ships has a different firing pattern and some additional sort of bibs and bobs, I guess you'd say, that make them a little bit different. And you get this really cool stats breakdown at the end of every level, including, like, look at this. As you scroll through this graph that shows you hitting milestones, it gives you little single snapshots of what your board looked like. So you can really, it doesn't have full-on replays, but you can see your progress and potentially where you messed up. And I think that's really, really neat. So here's a different one. Your objective here is, your pass objective is time, which means you have to survive. And then you have to make sure what's called the viruses, which is these things, which are pretty obvious, don't expand too much because they self-populate. So you have to keep the virus sort of culled in order to prevent it from spreading beyond a certain point if you want to pass the level. Really interesting different way to do it. There are a lot of enemy types in this, and I'm certain I haven't run into them all yet. And this has just really, really surprised me. I really like the colors in this are so bright and vibrant that the game almost looks vectorish, which I think is really neat. That is very much something Geometry Wars tried to go to as well, but this has an almost more, I don't know what you call it, ethereal look maybe to it, something like that. It just has a very, very nice, like, hyper neon-esque movement. The little screen warp effects and things like that it does, I think are really neat and really add a lot to it. It's just a really, really cool aesthetic. And, you know, the music it's good action-y arcade music. It's not over the top, but, you know, it's beaty and it sort of keeps you engaged into things. And as you can see there, I failed the mission, but what's great about this is one of the ones that challenged me a bit more, is you can, if you die like that, hit a button, instantly back in. And in fact, you can press and hold that button while you're in the middle of the mission if you know you're not doing well, and just restart it very, very quickly. Love anything that offers instant restart like that. I think that's very important to keeping sort of flow going with games like this, because having to wait any length of time between restarting levels in something like this is what leads to frustration and what leads to people saying, ah, screw this, and bouncing out of it. So yeah, this is just a really compelling twin stick shooter, and it as I said, it doesn't make any bones about the fact that it's inspired by Geometry Wars. But they're not making Geometry Wars anymore, you know, because Activision owns it. They made a Geometry Wars 3 a few years back that was okay, but it was, and it had its multiple levels and stuff like that too, but it just didn't feel the same. I got to a certain point in it and then was just like, and what I'd honestly really love to see is a remake for modern platforms of Geometry Wars Galaxies, which was the DS game, because that had so many things going on in it. A lot of people didn't like it because they said it was overly complicated, and that Geometry Wars was meant to be simple. You know, it wasn't that it was that they just went too far with it. I don't know if I agree with that. I thought it was fine. I thought it was actually quite good. But, and the thing is, this is not that either. This is somewhere in between. That Geometry Wars Galaxies was, it did have a lot going on, and sometimes it was a little hard to keep track of because it had an upgrade system and this sort of in-game currency thing and a bunch of stuff that that definitely was more involved than the game it was inspired by. Also wasn't made by the original developers. But this one strikes the balance well, I think, because it's not as simple as the original game was, which I think by the standards of some of the twin-stick shooters that we have now is probably too simplified. But it is... It doesn't go too far with it. It adds in a bunch of different enemies, a different way of tracking your objectives. Indeed, it removes the score attack element, and it sort of puts it all into this sort of campaign level tree that you've seen, but it still retains the original spirit of what they were going for with Geometry Wars. This is an evolution of that formula, where I think some would say something like Geometry Wars Galaxies is more of a revolution. And I think if you're a fan of Geometry Wars, I have it on Steam. I don't know if you can still buy the PC version or not, but it is still a classic, and it is still, without a doubt, absolutely wonderful. But this is really, really cool, and I just really like what it's done with the formula. I started playing this, and within 5 minutes, I was like, yeah, this guy's onto something. And that this is largely done by one person is even more impressive. And so was the original Geometry Wars, to be fair. I mean, the history of Geometry Wars is interesting. It was originally like an Easter egg, basically, in one of the Project Gotham racing titles. And then people loved it so much that they turned it into its own game. And, you know, it launched with the Xbox 360, which is one of the reasons it was such a hit as well. But so it kind of had, you know, single person inspirations as well, but I really think this is a cool thing. And if you're a twin stick shooter fan, you definitely shouldn't miss it. If you're a Geometry Wars fan, you also definitely shouldn't miss it. And you know, the thing with Geometry Wars is that it always started out easy, but it got really, really hard really quick because it was a score attack. It was a score attack game. This takes that element out, which I do think some fans won't like. I mean, I'm a big score attack guy myself, right? And when I first saw that this had no score system, I was like, ugh, really? But it grew on me really quick. And this does the same thing in terms of ramping up the challenge. You'll have easier missions, but then you'll run into other ones that are, you know, really gnarly. And that will challenge you quite a bit, especially if you want to go through every single level, which I really think you should. I think you're kind of depriving yourself of the experience if you skip levels in this, or just try to, you know, go right to the end very, very quickly. You really need to experience the whole lot, I think, to enjoy it. But yeah, this impressed me a lot, and I think it's really cool. I believe this is this developer's first title, and if so, masterful job. I think it knows what it's going for, and it sticks to that very well. So I would definitely recommend giving this a try. It's only on PC at the moment. Obviously, this is something that would be great to see on other systems. This is another quick session game, so it would be great on something like the Switch. You can... This I imagine would run on fairly low spec hardware. I haven't tried it myself, but this would probably be good for that. So if you're someone who doesn't have a high-end laptop, or maybe even has a work laptop with integrated graphics, you could probably get away with playing this. Might have to turn down the detail or the resolution a little bit, but you know, you get that really good core gameplay loop, which I think is what you're really here for at the end of the day. And yeah, this went from something where I went, ooh, this looks interesting, to, oh yeah, this is really, really good, and I'd really like to finish this. And it's something that I'll, you know, I don't tend to play games like this in long sessions. You know, I tend to do a level here, a level there, and it may take me a while to eventually get to the end, but I do. And that's for sure what I want to do with this. I can already tell just from this first level in the second section that the challenge is going to definitely get much more significant. But I'm down for that. I think that's going to be pretty cool, and that's what you really want out of something like this as well, is a good challenge, which they offer. I'm glad I've covered some really good, you know, arcadey twin stick games lately, and I'm actually really happy to see how many of these that we're getting now. And I hope these are doing well, because it really feels in some ways, especially with a lot of the games that I've covered lately, that we're in kind of a renaissance of these older school genres like twin sticks and brawlers and shmups and things like that. It just kind of feels like a lot of that stuff is coming back in vogue to a certain degree, and I love it. I really, really do. And, you know, if the Activisions of the world aren't going to give us a new Geometry Wars, then I'm perfectly fine with that falling to someone else. And yeah, this developer seems to have done a fantastic job with that. So that is Gridform. As I said, this is a pre-release version that I played, but what you saw here is probably what you're going to get if you play the full game. So definitely check it out when it arrives. I've been enjoying it a lot, and I do intend to finish this up. I think a worthy successor to Geometry Wars has been made here, and trust me, that's not something I say lightly. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think about this. What do you think about other twin stick games that are out lately that I maybe haven't covered? What interests you? You know, what has been interesting you? What do you think I might enjoy? You know, what would you like to see if Activision suddenly came out and said, all right, fine, we will make a new Geometry Wars? What would that need to look like to you now to be a to be a big deal. I'd be curious about that. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover indie and retro titles there, including a lot of stuff that you won't see over here on YouTube. I have a fantastic community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you on the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.